Good
This
morning.
meeting is being recorded.
Good morning and good evening, everyone. Thank you for those who have joined us today for this Community Builders Workshop. The speaker for today's workshop is Aaron Barreiro. He's a successful community builder and entrepreneur himself. He's the founder of 1Strive. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to begin this workshop where Aaron will tell us a little bit about his original story on what brought him into community building and what 1Strive is all about. Aaron, on you.
Of course. Thank you again, everyone, Sneha, for inviting me, and Yuki and Anchor for just putting this event together. I'm really excited about it. My story with community goes back to building community in person. I would say I've always loved building community. I wasn't always aware of it. When I was in college and high school, I created organizations. I started a basketball club in high school that had over 50 people come every day after school. When I was in college, we had a group of over 150 people in our student government when I was president. And so there's this pattern of just creating community everywhere that I go. But it really wasn't until recently that I understood how important it was to me. 4 years ago, my wife and I moved to Mexico to serve underprivileged communities here. We've been here since then, 2018. And as we've been here, we've really seen a need to help youth in the area. And we understood early on that community was the way to go about doing that. And so currently here in Mexico, we have a nonprofit that's based out in the United States, and we're serving underprivileged youth by creating a community that allows them to find new opportunities in a world where opportunities are difficult, and also creating a safe place for them to grow up, to be children, and to just have a different perspective on life. And so that's kind of where the passion for community came from. And now online, just taking what I've learned and applying it to people everywhere else has just been incredible. And seeing people come together, like-minded people, and the impact we can have, that's what really gave us the opportunity to start 1Strive, which is an organization that's focused on bringing incredible people together under singular goals. And it doesn't matter what the goal is. In one case, it could be community. In another case, it could be social impact. But the idea is just having the ability to leverage a collective group of people for good things. So that's what we do at 1Strive. And I'm really excited to be talking to you all today about how we build community, our frameworks, and really specifically looking at how you as an individual and your personal brand actually comes first before you start community.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's really good to know about 1Strive and what brought you into community building. So for the agenda for today's event is you will have a little presentation that you will be going ahead with first, and later we will have like a Q&A discussion. We have 5 questions that we'll be targeting on. Meanwhile, the participants, if you have any questions that you would like to shoot towards Aaron, you can just put it on the chat below so we can try to answer them all.
Yes, definitely feel free to ask your questions. And I know I wanted to start also and just ask Anchor about Yuki and the community platform that you all are building. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit first before I get into my presentation.
Sure. Thanks, Aaron, for doing the session with us. I'm the co-founder of the community platform Yuki. It's a white label community platform for creators, brand, and businesses to set up their own community, their own branded community directly on their website or an app versus a Facebook group, Discord, or a Slack channel. It allows you to have discussion, host polls, host live events, monetize your communities by running memberships, both through fiat platforms like Stripe and PayPal, as well as if you're into crypto, by connecting your wallets as well. The original idea was built out of an internal tool we had to manage our own community. And we got a good feedback from our initial users that they wanted this for their own business. who were primarily course creators, influencers, product owners, wanted to have a deeper relationship with the users. So that's the whole idea. And we believe in community-led growth, meaning you get your initial set of users, build your product based on the feedback you get from the users. And yeah, I think that notion or that idea with a product. Thanks.
Thanks so much. And there definitely is more need for all these things, as everyone really online starts to move towards community as a way to build their business or try to accomplish more with the things that they care about. Having community platforms is extremely important. So I think it's incredible what you and the team are doing there. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. And we're just going to talk a little bit about how we go about building community, and starting with you as an individual and then your team. The number one thing for me when it comes to community is I do not believe that you can do it by yourself. And if you try and create a community where you are the only pillar, where you're the only person that matters, then that's going to fail. And so it's a combination of understanding who you are as a leader in a community, understanding who other leaders are, and building a process of helping others lead the community with you. But it all starts with them as people and as individuals. And so it gets into this conversation of, to build community, you actually have to start with yourself being likable, trustworthy, and memorable. And so that's what we're going to talk about, how you can do that for you as an individual, and also how you can teach your team members in your community to do the same things. That way everyone can have a really good experience in the communities that you're building. So for me, number one, I always have to start with purpose when I talk about community. We're going to talk about everything else, but it has to be said, because if you're trying to build a community, but it's not first, the purpose is not first, and it's not purpose centered, then there's no point in doing it. Because the ultimate thing about community is, as a good friend of mine, Nick, says, it's easy and it's not, because it takes a lot of work. Building community isn't scalable work in the sense that it's, once you get a system going, it just goes and it happens really easy. The reality is there's a process of always building trust, always getting to know people, always trying to create relationships. And you're not going to do that consistently and well if you don't have a clear-cut purpose. So when I talk about purpose, it doesn't have to be save the world purpose. Communities come together around different things. Communities can come around a purpose of cleaning up your own neighborhood, or it can be about NFTs and sharing NFTs with all of the state or all of the country. There's so many different ways to anchor a community in purpose, but you have to focus on what that thing is that brings everyone together. So for instance, here in Mexico, when we think about our purpose, it's about helping youth find success. And we bring everyone around this idea of something that youth are going to love. Of course, they want opportunities to make more money. Of course, they want opportunities to have new experiences, to travel, to help their families. And so by helping youth be successful, and that being our purpose, it really helps us make sure that everything we do is purpose-led and purpose-centered. So before I talk about anything else, you're always going to hear me say first, purpose is the most important thing with any community that any of you are building. If you don't have a purpose and things are struggling in your community, you may know why. But now that we've talked about purpose, let's talk about brand and why brand is something that we think is so important to start a community. So here I have it stand out and then blend in. And I think that's the perfect way to capture what creating a community looks like from start to finish. You want to stand out because you have to be likable. You have to be someone that people want to be in a community with, that people want to understand and align with you. But once you've stood out, then your goal is to blend back in, to become part of the community and not to always be standing out and being a part. And I wanted to talk about spies. My wife and I love to watch movies throughout the week, and a lot of times we'll watch a spy movie, and it may be a myth, it may be true, I don't actually know. But one of the things they say about spies is they try and choose people that blend in. people that look average, that you wouldn't think, oh, this person is extra special or not someone that's spectacular. It's someone that if you put them in a crowd, they would get lost. They're people that never want to stand out. And so when we think about a spy and how they go about what they do, those are some of the key things. And if you think about that as yourself and how you want to go about, if you really have a want to build community, you don't want to blend in at the start. You don't want to be someone that people would just forget about completely if you were to be thrown in a crowd. So you want to have something that helps you stand out. And a lot of times that's always going to tie back to your purpose. If you truly believe in something, if you're truly passionate about something, it's contagious, and people want that. People are inspired by those things. And whatever your purpose is, when you learn how to communicate that message, when you learn how to really own that, it helps you stand out in a way that's both authentic and genuine, and people want to come around you in that process. So it's an interesting thing, and I want to make it clear. It's not about standing out forever. It's stand out so that people begin to follow who you are, begin to believe in who you are. And then once you're ready to now say launch a community and build things with people, you want to blend back in. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So the power of brand. And I want, actually, before I get to that and talk into what we want to do with brand, I want to tell you a story about a man that sells raspas here in Mexico. Raspas, for all of you that don't know, is like a shaved ice type of dessert. So you shave ice, you put flavoring to it, and then it's this really good dessert. And so there was always this one man that we would buy raspas from. He was just really kind, really receiving. And every time you would drive by him, there was just this want to stop at his stand and buy raspas. And so, like I said, he's a person that stood out. And then one day we noticed that he wasn't there. His stand was closed. So we're like, oh, okay, well, that's strange, because he was open every single day, Monday to Sunday, never missed, never. And so it was unusual to see his stand be closed. After a week went by, we actually got kind of worried. We're like, where is this guy? This is so unusual for him to be gone. And we got so worried that we actually started asking around the neighborhood to find out, hey, what happened to our friend who sells raspas? We haven't seen him in a long time. Now, whatever happened afterward, it doesn't matter as much to this conversation as what we're talking about. When you are someone that stands out and makes people feel welcomed, no matter what it is that you're offering, then you hold a special place in people's lives. And that's what the power of brand is. It's really creating a place in people's lives. So that way, no matter where you are, people think about you when they think about, let's say, community, or let's say NFTs, or let's say creating content, marketing, all these different things. It has to be a strong connection between who you are and what you do. So when we start with brand, here are some things really simply that you can do. Number one, you have to identify your voice and your message. So voice first, this is you communicating what your purpose is. This is you saying, I know what I want to do, I know what I want to accomplish, but how do I create a message about that in a way that everyone can understand? It's simple enough, and also people are inspired by it and want to be part of it. If you start your brand and no one is ever interested in what you have to say because you don't know how to communicate it, you're never going to get the traction you want to build a community. And it's a sad thing, because not everyone has that built-in ability or has practiced these things. And so some people really do struggle with this first step to create a memorable brand, to become likable, because they haven't learned how to really craft that message. So first thing here, I have to tell you, like, think about it, get help, reach out to people. If you don't know how to craft your message, if you don't know how to talk about what you care about passionately in a way that people want to help you, work with someone, a friend, someone that gives you good advice. If you're on LinkedIn, which is most of us who came to this event, find someone that is willing to help you out and create that voice. And now the other thing about voice and message when it comes to brand is it's not just what you write, what you say when you record a video, it's the look of everything that you create. It's having a consistency around your brand. It's having essentially something that people can always know, hey, when I see this, it looks like Aaron. And so I'm going to really understand that I'm always going to connect this look with him. A good example, I had a friend who shared an image of a bunch of umbrellas, and they were all black with one umbrella that was a really strong yellow. And so I told her, I was like, hey, it looks like you were thinking about me when you shared this image, because it's perfectly on brand for everything that we do. And then the message she shared, and she said, yes, when she shared it, she was thinking about me in 1Strive. And so that's what we're talking about. It's creating a consistency and a connection in the brain with the things that you put out, with the things that that you tie to yourself. And it's really important on this first step that you understand that your brand exists whether you craft it or not. If you are not intentionally building your brand, it's still being built without you. And that is really important, especially for a community builder, because if you spend a ton of time on LinkedIn or in Reddit or in whatever platform it is that you are trying to eventually launch a community out of, and people just see you as someone who never engages, never tells who they are, is never transparent, and just creates a very flat image of who you are, then that's going to stick with you. And that's really important, because people aren't going to want to join an initiative or a venture with you if that's the idea that they have. And so this part is really important. And this first section is about being likable. You have to be likable to start and even begin to build community. Now, after that, you want to engage with others and let them see you. So it's not just about, it's very easy to share a message that's been practiced, right? If someone asks me what my purpose is, if someone asks me what my vision is, I can practice that and have a perfect response. But when I engage with someone, when all of a sudden someone asks me a question that I don't expect, or when I'm seeing someone else's content and I'm talking with them and I'm trying to engage with them, it's easy to know when you're authentic or inauthentic. And so when you engage with people, it's your opportunity to let people know that you actually act out and believe everything that you talk about. Your voice, your message, your brand, it's actually real. And that's so important, because no one wants fake. Fake does not work long-term. And a community is a long-term initiative. So if you're trying to build community and you don't have depth to the things that you do, things are always going to struggle, and eventually you're not going to be able to really create the success that you want to. You're not going to be able to build the community that you want to. The other thing that this does, it makes you memorable. If you can engage with a lot of people, if you can really create strong relationships with a lot of people, you become memorable, and people will now know that, hey, this person is not just wanting to stand on a platform and talk about themselves all day. They're invested in me and they're invested in others. And people notice that. Don't think that it goes unnoticed. So this second section is about being memorable and really creating that pattern of consistency, which is the last part. Represent your brand consistently. You have to be consistent in everything you do, in how you create images, how you talk about what you talk about, your voice, how you interact with people. This consistency part is the last part, and it's what builds trust. If you don't have trust, then there's no reason for people to have you top of mind when they think about different things. The reality is there is at least another 1,000 people in the world trying to do what you're doing. And so if you do not create trust with someone in your audience, with someone in your community that you're building, then they're going to go to someone else for the services that you want to offer. They're going to go to someone else for that sense of community that you're trying to create. So having a trustworthy brand is going to be what keeps you top of mind and what makes someone decide, I want to work with you as opposed to X person over there. So having that trust is extremely important, and you will never build trust if you're not consistent in whatever it is that you're doing. So we start with brand because that's what makes you likable, memorable, and trustworthy. And I want to spend a little bit more time talking about being trustworthy. So trust opens up new and unimagined possibilities. When I think about trust, I think about coffee shops. Coffee shops are a special place for me. When I first started a business 6 years ago, I would do all of my work out of a coffee shop, and I would go to the same place every single time. And there's just a feeling about being in a place that you're comfortable, being in a place that makes you feel like it's a second home, right? That's what trust does. And coffee shops, I feel like, are incredible for that. And so whenever I go to a new place or I'm in a different location, for instance, here in Mexico, there really isn't a coffee shop that I trust. And so there's not a place that I like to go and do work outside of my house. And that's how important trust can be. And so whenever I go anywhere, I'm trying to find a place that I know is trustworthy, that makes me feel comfortable, that makes me feel like the people know what they're doing, right? It gets into everything. I love coffee. I know about coffee. And so if I go to a place and I see that, they don't measure how much coffee they use, they don't use the type of grinders that they should be using, all these little details, or if I ask them questions about the coffee and they don't know how to answer, then I'm losing trust with this location. And it makes me less likely to want to come back. I mean, of course, the taste of the coffee itself. There are places where I've gone once and I will never go again because it was just not my favorite. So trust is huge. And trust really ties into one of the last things that I want to talk about when we think about creating community, because all of this is sort of the groundwork, right? It's a lot of effort to just set up a foundation, but that's the reality. This is the foundation of your community. If you do this, this is steps 1, 2, and 3. It's not the last step in the process, but that speaks to why building community can be difficult. And so when we get into trust and we look at this quote, what I loved about it is how it opens up unimagined possibilities. I think that's what community is about. Because if I am by myself and I think about all of my ideas, I know exactly who I am, what I believe, and everything that I do will be limited. But once you come into a community and you start getting to know other people and you start to hear their dreams and their visions and what they're passionate about, and all of that aligns towards one common goal, all of a sudden you're starting to enter a new place of innovation, a new place of new possibilities. And that's what's really beautiful about communities and why we're drawn to them, because we can all of a sudden accomplish things that we never thought were possible because we're trusting in others in the community as well. And so when we have trust built into a community, when we have trust that's built into a community, it allows us to allow for creativity in the process. And so creativity is the last thing that I want to talk about before we get into questions, because creativity is such an important thing to building a long-lasting community. And so this is sort of an extra bit of information. So when we think about creativity, what we're talking about is just really leaving space to allow other people in your community to contribute to the goal, right? When you start with yourself, you have a dream, you have a vision, you have something that you want to be accomplished. But as you let other people in, and as we said at the beginning, when you start to blend in with the community, your number one goal is now to let other people start to come in, to take over and share what they want to see happen. And that's really important. That's really powerful, because that's where creativity happens and where success for your community is going to be found long-term. So the last thing I want to leave you with before we talk about questions and before we think about how you can start building your communities is I want you to think about how can you create a space for creativity in everything that you do, because that's really going to transform everything that you do about your community. So I'm going to leave it there and give the opportunity for some questions that everyone has. Feel free to drop them in the chat. And thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Aaron, for hosting the session, and super insightful, especially the part that your brand gets built up if you work on it or you don't. And it's super important to stay consistent in your communication with your audience and your branding. That was super insightful. We can start with the Q&A section. If you have any questions, please drop them into the chat. And we have some questions already shared by our community members. So we can start with them. And if you have any further questions, we can take it up after these ones. So what are some of the common myths or notions about building community that you've come across? And
So I think,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Please go. Yeah.
So I think one of the most common myths is that a community has to be big, right? People don't feel like they're in a community if it doesn't have 100 people or 300 people. There's this idea that community is something only that's large in scale. And that's definitely not true. You can be in a community if you have 5 people, if you have 10 people. Community is not about the number of people that you're with. It's about the sense and the feeling that the people in the community have. If there's a strong connection, if there's a tie between the people that share that space, you have a community. And that can be 2 to 3 people even, but it's about creating that feeling. And I think that's important to having the trust that we've talked about. If you don't have trust, you can't create that sense of community. And so I think that's one of the most common myths about building community. The other thing is that it's for everyone. Community building is not for everyone. It's not for every organization, because not everyone actually is invested and cares about building community. And if you are not really invested in that process, you're not going to see the fruits of your labor, and it's going to feel more of a chore than it is what you intended it to be in the first place. And so community building is not meant to be easy. It's not meant to be for everyone. It's meant to be something that really brings people together, is purpose-led, and that takes a lot of time and effort.
I think that's, again, super insightful. Going deeper with engagement in the community is super important, rather than sort of having the number of users or number of followers in your community. Yeah, I think we can switch to the next question. What is the most common reason communities fail? Because they don't have a compelling reason to exist? Or what do you have to say about that? And what are the reasons that communities fail? The top reasons why a community would fail or does fail. Yeah.
Of course. So I think we've talked a little bit about already purpose. If you don't have purpose, your community will fail. Outside of that, I think it's not really putting the time and effort. The reality is everyone loves the idea of community, but the investment isn't always there. Let's think about an organization, for instance. They're not going to actually put, a lot of organizations don't put resources behind building community. It's expected that it's something extras that someone can do. And if you're doing this alone to build community, it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of time that is not paid in any sense other than the fruitfulness of having a successful community in the future. And so number one is just the effort that goes up front is a lot. And most people don't have the want to actually put in that effort to start. If you do have that effort and you do begin to realize, okay, we have something that's working, we have a purpose that people really enjoy, and you've actually brought them together in a space, the reason your community could fail is because you did not invest in people and have other people do the same thing that you did. If you went through the effort of getting to know people and you built up a strong brand that was trustworthy, that was memorable, but you didn't have that happen between other members in the community, it's going to fail because you can't carry the work of an entire community alone. So you have to intentionally identify other people that are going to help make that community successful. And so even if you get to a stage where you have a community that believes in everything, you have to invest in other people or it's going to fall apart still.
I think absolutely. One of the reasons I think a lot of people have followers, that is an audience where they have one-to-many kind of engagement, but when they transition to a many-to-many kind of engagement, which is actually a community, there is a lot of sort of inhibition from the users, as well as they've not put in the right kind of effort to bring that organically to users, so they can sort of help each other grow in a community. I think the values that the community member provide to each other, if there is a sort of a directional push towards that, And then you start seeing a lot of engagement in the community. We can take up the next question. Your personal brand is something that follows you around, whether you want it or not. So could you elaborate what a personal brand is, and what is personal branding first? Yeah.
Of course. So
Yeah.
we talked a little bit about brand, but I think one of the best ways to think about your personal brand outside of purpose, outside of what you believe in, it's what you're known for, right? If I were to ask every one of you, what is the most common question you're asked by friends, by family, by people in your networks, and they tell you something, for instance, for me beforehand, I was really known for just being a helper, helping people with things that they need, with personal problems. And I had a coach ask me, is that what you want to be known for? And in a basic sense, it wasn't what I wanted people to just think of me as. And so I knew I had to shift where my brand was going to go, because I knew what I wanted to position myself as, and the goals that we wanted to accomplish. And so I think that's one of the best ways to think about your brand. It's not just about everything you share and what you talk about. It's what are you known for, and what are people going to you specifically for help? And if people are coming to you for something that you do not want to be known for, then you want to make sure you avoid that, right? And so another good example is, I have a lot of experience in writing. I've been a writer, and freelance writing has been a big part of my career. I don't talk about writing a lot because I don't want to be known as a writer, because I want to focus on building things, and I want to focus on entrepreneurship and startups. And so I can't focus my efforts on writing, because if I do that, then people will think of me more as a writer than anything else. And so you really want to ask yourself, or have someone, or even ask a friend, say, hey, when you think of me, what would you come to me for help for? And listen to their answer, listen to it honestly, don't be offended, and then try and understand, okay, this is what I'm known for, how can I pivot? And I'll tell you, especially on platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn, Reddit, different places where you have online presence, you can pivot your brand within a month, really. If you really consistently, daily start talking about different things, people are going to create new associations with you, and new people that you meet are going to get to know you for what you begin to talk about. What do you think, Anchor?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely important. What is the first thing that comes to a person's mind when they're talking about or thinking about you is the starting point of your brand. And you can do a consistent effort to switch or shift to another. You want, as you mentioned, you want to be known as a builder. So I think sharing content around building, sharing your vision regarding a product you're building would be a directional way to showcase your brand as a builder, versus a writer would be writing a lot of content, and yeah, a different kind of use case. Taking another questions, what do startups need to do differently when it comes to building an online community? When staff and budget are limited, what can you do, and where do you get started? So I think there is a lot of products are using communities for managing the support, growing the audience, getting that many to many discussions and discussions going out, which can help them sort of spread their brand, also help them answer support queries, create a lot of content. How do you get started? So bare minimum, if I have a product, how do I get started? I'm a startup. Yeah.
For startups, it depends on the size, right? If you have a team of, let's say, 10 people, I think it's a little bit easier, because there's going to be more trust in that group. And so it takes buy-in, right? The leaders of that startup have to believe in this effort. If they don't have buy-in there, then again, it's going to fall flat, because there's not a real purpose behind it. So number one is the leaders. And let's say you're not one of the leaders, and you think community is a right decision for the startup, you want to definitely go to them and start really trying to convince them of why it's important. And as a leader, and as someone who's leading a startup, if you want to do community and you don't have a really strong purpose, I want to challenge you now to say, figure out that purpose, start there, and then have conversations with the entire group. Or if it's a larger organization, let's say there's 50 people or 100 people, then you want to identify a team of maybe 5, 10, 20 people that you trust and that are willing to possibly do work that's going to go uncompensated. That's just the reality in a startup. If you have limited funds, if you have limited time, then some of that effort is really going to be falling in as extra things on their plates. But when you have a purpose, when you have that buy-in, it makes them want to do it more. And it's also going to lead to success later on. It's the idea of delayed gratification, right? It's not about what you're going to receive in the moment. It's about understanding that maybe in 6 months, maybe in a year, we're going to create something unique. We're going to create something special. And that's worth the sacrifice we're putting up front. So really, it's about messaging, and it's about believing you're really understanding what you talk about and being able to sell that vision to your staff and everyone involved. And it's a hard thing to make up. If you don't have it, you don't have it. So I definitely encourage you, if community is where you're going, you really have to believe in it.
Yeah, it's a mix of science and art, and there are things that can be learned, and others you have to build your skill set if you're an artist and put in the hours for it. So the other questions I would take up is, what do I do if I'm not, I don't want to share anything about myself? Where do I get started? So a lot of people in the tech industry and generally builders might be introverts. And I think the question points out, how do you build a community if you're an introvert and have not been able to share as more people on social media have about their life, their journeys? How do you get started? How do you break that bridge? And how do you cross that bridge of being an introvert and building a community? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'll say two things. People are attracted either to story or they're attracted to brilliance. And when we think about memorable, we think about trustworthy. A lot of people have built incredible senses of community, incredible communities, because the individual that started it was a brilliant person. And so what I'll say is it's one or the other. Or it's about finding someone who you can trust to help communicate your vision. So let's talk about the three things, right? The number one, telling your story, being transparent is important. It's what creates a sense that you're more than just a business, that you're more than just someone that's trying to get something, that you really believe in what you talk about because how it ties to you personally, what you feel in your heart, what you think about in your mind all the time. You're creating an opportunity for people to see behind what we're trying to show perfection all the time. And so I'm a big advocate for transparency and for telling your story, but I do understand it's not something that everyone is really comfortable with. And so the second option would be find someone that you trust, find someone that you know that is okay with that and that buys in and is 100% aligned with your vision and your purpose, and allow them to tell the story of the community that wants to be built. If they can do it as effectively or more effectively than you can, and they truly believe in it, then there's nothing wrong with allowing them to take that and run with it. But you have to really trust that person. You really have to be invested with them, understand who they are, understand when they're being genuine, or if they're just trying to maybe take advantage, whatever it may be. But definitely spend that time to get to know that individual. And the last one is just, honestly, there are some people that are just brilliant, and their brilliance allows people to just be drawn to them, even if they don't share things personally. And you think about, people, whether it's Elon Musk, or when you think about someone like Jeff Bezos, or different people in history who they just have a thing about them that just makes them 100% brilliant, and they can speak so perfectly about the work that they do that they don't have to share about themselves because they explain things in a way that no one else can. Right. And that's the brilliance factor. And there are people who have that, who know that they can honestly teach something better than anyone else could ever teach it. And if you have that, you want to leverage it, and you want to make sure that you're really showing off that expertise and making people know, I'm the only one that can do this. There's no one like me. And that can be another place to start. So those are three different options that I can definitely recommend if you're someone who doesn't really want to share about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. You can be brilliant as Elon Musk and also have popcorn content with it. That's the perfect mix.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think any questions, I guess you can drop it in the chat. If you want to introduce yourself, you can switch on your camera, talk about yourself. Um, Happy to know more about you and your journey in building a community. Yeah. Yeah. So another question I had is, say I did circle around the point of an audience and a community. How do you know that there is a movement between an audience towards a community, and how do you kickstart that? So if there is, say you have some followers on YouTube, and I think YouTube is not a great platform to have many to many kind of conversations, and you move to another platform, and how do you kickstart conversations there? So are there any best practices for that? And what do you recommend?
Mhm. So to speak to the first part about understanding whether you have an audience or understanding where you have a sense of community, if you're on a public platform like LinkedIn or Twitter, or wherever it is that you like to really be, the best way to know if you have an audience or community, even there, is just the way that people engage and interact with each other. If you create spaces and no one really gets to know each other, no one speaks, no one spends the time interacting, and all they do is just engage with you without actually putting any words, then you have more of an audience. These are people that do not feel like they've been brought into your sphere of influence, into your sphere of caring, your sphere of love. And that's an audience. And some people want to build large audiences without community, and that's 100% okay. But you know, when you do have a community, when you start to really see that there's a sense of people having space to really be themselves and to really help others and to be there, not really caring what happens or comes from it. They're just invested in that process. And so I think that's the number one thing. If you decide to launch a community and all you have is an audience, it's going to be, maybe there's going to be a lot of people that join to start, but it is going to be very quiet. And so when you try and take them somewhere else, and so you definitely, I think before you even decide to go to a different platform, you want to really be working dedicated and intentionally to build this sense of community, because again, it goes back to your purpose. If if you don't believe in it, then it's never going to be what you want it to be. And a community are not self-serving. A community is never about selling more. It's never about having more income. If that's what you're thinking, then you're wrong. And that's just, it's a different approach. Then that's all I'll say. And now when you get into a community and you have created the space, it goes back to one, you have to be clear. You have to make things simple, and you have to make sure that people understand what it looks like to be in this community. If you don't have clear instructions and people get lost and they have no idea what they're doing, they're going to disengage really quick. So you want to make things as simple as possible, understand what the framework is, and then also understand what the vision is. Let people know where they're going, why they're joining this, and what we're accomplishing together. That's really, really important at the very start of taking people into a closed community.
Yeah, I think Bogdan has a similar question, the one we are discussing. What is the one we've observed one thing that we have a lack of interactivity inside the community. Sort of games or other similar tricks. How do you prompt members to turn active instead of passive reading content? This is valid for members who are actually interested in the content and not remain passive. So I think this is an extension of what we were discussing earlier. How do you prompt users? So are there notifications? Can you host regular events? Or what is what is the secret sauce to get engagement going, if there is any? So.
First of all, it's nice to have you, Bogdan. I can't wait to actually see you one day, but I've enjoyed just you being part of everything that we're doing. And thank you for the question. I think the thing that you need to think about is it's going to take more work. I think having one-on-one conversations with people that are very passionate, right? There are people who are going to join a community and are extremely passionate about what you're talking about. So recognize that. Don't be blind to other people's passion. I think sometimes we want to be the most passionate, and sometimes there are other people who can be more passionate about something that you share, and that's okay. And so don't be blind to what other people bring to the table. Recognize their strengths, have conversations one-on-one with them and say, hey, I love how you share about this. I love how you talk about this. I would love for you to help me make sure that we start to build a community that thrives, because if you care about this so much and it doesn't work, then none of us are going to be happy. And so really trust other people and have those one-on-one conversations, and then consistently share your message, share that vision, and create opportunities for people to have group conversations when you just start. You're going to bring people that trust you, and you need to create trust within everyone else. And so that's really, really important to create that space, especially at the beginning when it's more manageable, to have that opportunity for everyone to get to know each other throughout the process.
I think that's a great answer to how to kickstart a community and find the right fit for your audience and the kind of content they want, rather than you driving a lot of content in the stuff you love. Take feedback, and I think go in a direction where there is a lot of engagement and a lot of acceptance from the users. Thanks, Bogdan. As Aaron mentioned, thanks for being part of our events. I think there was some issue with the link. I guess more people will join in as we go live on LinkedIn, and we share it over email with the community members. I think we've extended our time limits as well. I think Aaron would be busy building and serving people in Mexico, and it's a great initiative that we've taken up. And it's important for people to realize that community is just not online, and there is work offline as well. And it's about communicating with people, and that's what the crux of community building is. And yeah, if you want to have any conclusions or ending notes, please take over.
Yeah. What I will say is just thank you so much for having me, and really just encourage all of you, think about why it is that you want to build your community, and then really take the time to get to know people. Don't start too early. There's never, it's never too late to start. The more time you give to the process before you decide to create a separate platform or create a separate community, you can spend as much time as you want to. As long as you're dedicated, as long as you're consistent, you're never going to lose that trust. And so there's no such thing as too late to start. Make sure but there is definitely something as too early. If you start too early, it's just going to be not what everyone was hoping and not what everyone was expecting. And that can be disappointing, especially when you really are passionate about what you're talking about. So have patience, do the work, be willing to make that effort. And if you do, it's going to be an incredible experience for everyone involved. And that's what you want to accomplish. And so I'm really happy that we set this up. I'm glad for everyone that was here. Feel free, if you're creating community, if you're doing anything on LinkedIn in different spaces. I know I believe, Francisco, you're doing something in the Web3 NFT space. Feel free to tell me about that. And I'd love to continue chatting on LinkedIn or anywhere else. So thank you again, both Neha and Ankur, for having me.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for joining. And also I had today, I guess, a couple of people couldn't join because of work and because they did message me on LinkedIn saying that they would like to have the recording. So yeah, I guess if they have any questions directed towards you, I can share it meanwhile on LinkedIn.
Perfect.
I think let's come to the end of this session, and thanks for doing the workshop with us. It was super insightful, even for me, and I've been there sort of building the product. There was something to ponder upon, and after the call, I'll try to align my community building experience or journey based on the feedback I got from you and learning from the workshop.
Thank
Thanks
you so
again.
much.
Thanks for everyone who's joined in and who would join in on LinkedIn and other social media. We'll be back with the other sessions and looking forward to hosting Aaron again.
Thank you.
Thank you.